The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as I best could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitely settled, but the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. Thus begins the Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. Now, what I have here is a recap of what happened in the short story, followed by some literary criticism talk with one big point about the horror aspect of this story that I want to ask, and a couple other talking points that I think are worth looking at, as well as an exploration of Amontillado and why that wine in particular may have been chosen. And then we will have one writer's corner note, things that we can take with us as writers from this short story. So, what happens? Well, Fortunato has wronged Montresor many times, but when he became insulting to our speaker vows revenge in a way that Fortunato will know it is Montresor's revenge, but no one will ever discover. And this Fortunato fella has a weakness, his weakness being his love of wine. Our speaker knows wines too. And in the heat of carnival season, Fortunato approaches Montresor and he's drunk. He says to Fortunato, Montresor does, that he has some wine which was sold to him as Amontillado. But Montresor's not quite positive that's what it is. Couldn't you come, Fortunato, and help me discern whether or not this wine is Amontillado? Because if anyone could for sure tell, it would be you, Fortunato. Fortunato then insists that they go to the speaker's cellar. Reluctantly, Montresor agrees to take Fortunato into the catacombs where he says his cellar holds the Amontillado. Montresor gets Fortunato drunker and drunker as they go down into the catacombs. Montresor then leads him into a small cubby and chains him to the wall, then builds another wall, a wall which locks Fortunato into that cubby, entombing him while he's still alive. At the end of the story, Montresor tells us that this story, which is given to us, this tale of the Cask of Amontillado, happened 50 years ago. Makes us wonder, how old is Montresor in this story? I imagined him in his 30s-ish, which would make him 80 years old while he is telling us this story. Now, I think that it's probably necessary to start this discussion right here with a question of what does this mean? We have Montresor giving us his family motto, Nemo me impune lacessit, which means I am fully fluent in Thai. So I know exactly what this means. It means no one attacks me with impunity. What a strange and fortunate family motto. No one will ever suspect that when his family's enemy, Fortunato, who took down the family name, goes missing, that it would be the guy whose family motto is, "You will not get away with it." Strangely, this is also basically the motto of Scotland. So, I am not 100% sure if there's anything going on there, but what a strange, there's certainly an interpretation to be made. So, when we talk about Amontillado, this is what we're looking at. I've got it all the way down here. Where are we at? Stolen directly from Wikipedia. Amontillado, Spanish pronunciation, is a variety of sherry wine characterized by being darker than Fino but lighter than Oloroso. It is named after the Montilla region of Spain, where the style originated in the 18th century, although the name Amontillado is sometimes used commercially as a simple measure of color to label any sherry lying between a Fino and an Oloroso. It features prominently in the Edgar Allan Poe short story The Cask of Amontillado. Here's the interesting part. An Amontillado sherry begins as a Fino, fortified to approximately 15.5% alcohol. That is a wild percent for a wine, with a cap of floor yeast limiting its exposure to air. A cask of Fino is considered to be Amontillado if the layer of floor fails to develop adequately. It is intentionally killed by additional fortification, or is allowed to die off through non-replenishment. Without the layer of floor, Amontillado must be fortified to approximately 17.5% alcohol so that it does not oxidize too quickly. After the additional fortification, Amontillado oxidizes slowly, exposed to oxygen through the slightly porous American or Canadian oak casks, and gains a darker color and richer flavor than Fino. Amontillado is characterized by nutty aromas, tobacco, or aromatic herbs, and often ethereal, polished notes of oak. Ethereal wines. The fusion of two different aging processes gives Amontillado wines a specific flavor. So, why is it important that this wine in question be Amontillado? Well, Amontillado is very high percentage of alcohol for wine. Fortunato is a very high percentage of alcohol for people. A cask of Fino is considered to be Amontillado if the floor fails to develop adequately, it is intentionally killed by additional fortification, that's the alcohol, or is allowed to die off through non-replenishment. Where am I at here? There's the darkness, the question of darkness. How dark is the sherry? If it is properly dark, if it is dark enough, it is considered an Amontillado. Do you figure there's much light where Fortunato is being buried? I don't. I imagine that it's dark down there in the catacombs, if you will. Darker where he's at. And finally, you have the high alcohol percentage, you have the fact that it's darker, and then you have the, where is it? Limiting its exposure to the air. Remember that cough that Fortunato had? And then he is being buried alive, essentially. I mean, walled into a cave type thing. Yeah, it's going to be, he's going to suffer a lack of oxygen. He already had breathing problems. So I think those are the three reasons that Amontillado is the wine of choice here. Now, I want to touch very quickly on Edgar Allan Poe does not get the credit he deserves for titles. Now, I'm going to be very honest with you. This is only the second time that I have read The Cask of Amontillado, but I have read it before. Couldn't tell you what it was about before I read it again this time. The last time I read it was probably 6 years ago. Couldn't remember a thing. I've known the title, The Cask of Amontillado, my entire life. So one of the things that's unfortunate about being a weird kid and being a writer is that people give you Edgar Allan Poe books. So, being both a strange individual and a writer, I've got 30 or 40 books of Edgar Allan Poe that just show up at my apartment from time to time. Edgar Allan Poe is a writer that was, back when I was a kid, kind of seen as child friendly. There were, what were those? There used to be books at Walmart just thrown into a rack that had this little circle on it that said 2 for $3 or whatever they were. And there were kids' books, but they were novel length books. And I mean, it was Edgar Allan Poe galore in those. And I have known basically all of Edgar Allan Poe's titles my entire life. They stick with you. The Raven, simple and clean, but kind of sounds spooky, doesn't it? The Cask of Amontillado seems sort of foreign, sort of mystical at the same time, but dark. Cask of Amontillado. So Edgar Allan Poe does not get the credit he deserves for titles. These are small details to literature, but they stick with you. This is one of the reasons why I have a sneaking suspicion that Charles Bukowski is not quite as big as could he be. Now, I got this on screen right here. They have a little bit of a discussion about the Masons. Now, there has always been, in greater society, if you will, a little bit of paranoia about the Masons. Why? Well, why are they so secretive? How come we can't know what it is that they're doing? How come we can't know what it is that they do, where they are? Why is it that all of their stuff happens behind closed doors? We are a little bit suspicious of Masons. But at the same time, Masons maybe a little bit suspicious of you. We have here the fact that Fortunato does not quite trust Montresor when he realizes, "You are not of the Masons." "Yes, yes," I said, "yes, yes." "You? Impossible." "A Mason?" "A Mason," I replied. "A sign," he said. "A sign. It is this," I answered, producing from beneath the folds of my roquelaire a trowel. The secrecy that the common folk are not allowed inside to see is something that makes the common folk distrust. Same thing with politics. We don't know where these politicians are getting all of their money, but we know we pay an awful lot of taxes and we know how much they make or how much they're supposed to, right? So if there is a masonry, a brotherhood that is secret, we don't trust that. But is it Fortunato that is not to be trusted here? No, it seems 50 years after the fact that the one who is not to be trusted is, in fact, Montresor. The last thing I want to talk about before we get into the big idea here is the question of nitre. Montresor is mentioning the nitre that is growing in his catacombs. The nitre, we have to get out of here because of the nitre, the nitre, the nitre. Why would that figure so prevalently into this short story? Why keep mentioning it? Who cares? Nitra. Nitre. Well, I'll tell you why. Where did Fortunato come from in this story? Where do we meet him? We meet him, he's dressed for the carnival. He's dressed like a fool. He's dressed like a jester. And who is Montresor? Montresor is someone who is out to kill him. Montresor wants to put him away. Montresor wants to be the end of Fortunato. Why is this relevant? Well, nitre is used in fireworks. Nitre is also used in guns. We have in that one little element That one little oxidization, I believe, I think it's potassium. Is it potassium oxidase? Is that what is niter? Anyway, I believe it's an oxidization, which would be further into the irony here. But it is a dual symbol. The niter that is used for fireworks is something that Fortunato would enjoy. The niter used for killing is something that Montresor might employ. Now, we have the question of why? Why is Montresor so dead set on killing Fortunato? We are left, I believe, to assume that it is because of some great disgrace. He says at the very beginning, look, I mean, the injuries that this guy dealt me were in the thousands, right? And I dealt with it. We rolled with it, right? We put up the Philly shell and just took it. Just took it. But when it turned to insult, boy, I had to. Who is Montresor? Well, we understand that he's at least wealthy enough to have a catacombs. He's at least wealthy enough to have a cellar. He's at least wealthy enough to have, what was it called at the beginning here? I can't remember. The pipe of wine. Let me just Google this real quick. I cannot remember exactly what it is, but it is a massive amount of wine. Pipe of wine. Well, let me see. I'm sure this is absolutely titillating. 66 imperial gallons. The major wine producing countries use barrels extensively, which have developed standards and variants with the traditional English volumes that are commonly used in wine and wine cooperage industries. Examples include a hogshead, 300 liters. Where are we at here? I cannot find it. Anyway, a pipe of wine is a massive amount. I mean, gallons, and I believe it was over 100 gallons. So he's got money. Montresor has money. It seems he does not have status. It appears that whatever it was that Fortunato had said, had done was something that damaged the Montresor status. And that is why it is so important when the family crest is brought up, at least through inference. Now, the very big question here, what is the true horror here? Now, it seems kind of stupid to ask that question. What's the horror here? Well, the horror is a guy got buried alive, and he was drunk when it happened, so when he woke up and he didn't know where he was, he didn't remember how he got there. He was just some guy who came to buried alive in the darkness, right? That would be terrifying. And you die that way. We're told that no one found him for 50 years. We're 50 years later and no one found him. But here's the thing. I don't think that's the real thing you're supposed to be scared of here. I think what you're actually supposed to be scared of here is that how old is Montresor? Maybe 30, maybe 35, maybe 25, probably not younger than 25. I would imagine maybe not much older than 35. And this is taking place, the story, 50 years before our words. The speaker is telling us this story about 50 years in the past. This is quite likely, in my opinion, a deathbed confession. We have here Montresor, probably 85 years old, 80 years old. 75 years old at the youngest, telling us this story. Probably this is a deathbed confession, meaning no one ever figured this out. Meaning, who knows the people in your life that have committed this type of atrocity. The speaker says very clearly at the beginning of this story, we have up here, right at the beginning, he's talking to us, and he says, "You trust me. You know who I am. You know who I am." And then he says, I believe, again somewhere here at the end, "You know who I am. I'm telling you this. Likely this is a deathbed confession." The true horror of this short story is that this guy got away with it the whole time, and he's just now telling you. Who else in your life could be holding this type of secret? Anyone could be holding this type of secret. Now, moving on to the writer's corner, the one observation I really have here is a question, because it's something that struck me as absolutely absurd during the reading, but I'm not sure it should have. And the idea here is the passage of time. There is great significance to the passage of time. Now, while Montresor is building that wall, while Montresor is walling up Fortunato, how long does that take? It took me out of the story. While reading about Montresor putting down the first layer and the second layer and the third layer, and then old stupid started kicking around in there. And maybe I poked him a little bit. Then I put down the fourth layer and the fifth layer and the sixth layer, all the way up to the 10th layer. How long does this take? I mean, you've got a trowel with you. Are we talking full cement type wall? What are we doing here? How long does this take? But that's sort of the magic of literature. Maybe it took hours, but on the page, it's just 3 or 4 lines of time. Hemingway was very good at doing this. Hemingway was very good at giving you a line of dialogue, and then something happened, and then we have the same line of dialogue. It's kind of like the Anton Chigurh. Where does he work? I can't tell you that. Where does he work? Did you hear me? I can't tell you that. Where does he work? Right? When a character is delivering the same line more than once, something is happening in the middle. Where does he work? Even if the woman doesn't answer, if Anton on the page were to ask that question again, where does he work? We know, as the reader, some time had passed. Time enough for Anton to have realized this lady's not going to tell me. So that is an example of a long time going into a small area, just like in this short story. But you can also have a very short period of time blown up into a long time on the page. There is nothing stating that. So think of all of the action scenes you've ever read. Probably a lot of them took you longer to read than they would take to happen in real life. Someone is falling down the stairs, and as they're falling, their entire life flashes before their eyes, and maybe they feel their wrist break as they brace themselves and X, Y, and Z. But in real life, all that would take is 2 seconds. 1,000, 2 1,000. That's all over. But it takes us 4 minutes to read the page on which it happens. So that's just something that you can play with as a writer, jumping back and forth between the speeds in your created world. That is all I have for this, the Cask of Amontillado. We're here in October. This video will appear both in the short story playlist, the short story discussion playlist, as well as the Edgar Allan Poe playlist here on the channel. If you like or appreciate this sort of thing, hitting the like button really does help me out on the channel, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, consider hitting the subscribe button, because this is what I do. I'm talking about literature here, man. This is what we do here. There's poetry every Monday, and at the end of it, I hope to have you back for the next one.